Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business podcast. I'm your host, Catryn Becker. On this podcast, we love to interview all sorts of different successful people because we want to learn what they've learned. Because while a smart person learns from their mistakes, a genius learns from the mistakes of others. And today's guest is no different. He has had an incredible history, started 24 different companies. He's had products in over 11,000 stores. And what he's doing now is really interesting. And I'm so excited to be able to bring this to you because he's got a different proposition than you might have heard from other companies. He says, what would you do with $1 million? What sort of team would you have? Well, how would you run your company? And we're going to dig all into that. And so that you could know that those ideas you've got floating around in your head just might have a way to come to life. So Chris Joyce, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So $1 million. Are you just giving out $1 million to everyone? Like, you get $1 million, you get $1 million.
I wish, but it doesn't work that way. What we do is really, we say $1 million or $2 million of value, meaning that if a founder or a potential founder had $1 million or $2 million in their checking account, how would they build their company? What would they do? And then do what we call Gusher. Gusher is our platform. What Gusher is a performance-based equity platform where people join your company in exchange for equity. There's no exchange of funds, and a person doesn't need an investor. They don't need startup capital. What they need really is people at the beginning stages to take that idea, make it concrete, bring it to the marketplace. And even after that, they don't really need funds. They just need those people and relationships to get it going. Later stages, they may need capital, but in the beginning stages, up to about 10 million in revenue, they don't need a damn thing. They just need people to make the idea and the companies happen. And that's what we help do. We help show them that. We don't charge them money. We take equity in the company only so long as they're successful. And it's a way for anybody anywhere to be able to launch a company almost immediately and be able to get it going versus spending months, if not years out there trying to raise capital, and unsuccessfully, most of them at that.
Well, and people are coming in with ideas, like it's not fully baked. So it's almost like a step before like the Shark Tank model.
Sure. It's even more than that. So they're not even coming in necessarily with fully ideas. I'd say about 60-70% of ours has a general idea of what they want to do. But what I typically say is this: you don't need the idea. What you need is a problem. So typically a personal problem. So long as you have a problem, you don't need that solution. The whole point of somebody coming into your company is that they're experiencing that same problem as you, or they see the potential same problem in market as what you may think of. And if they have that same problem, chances are they're going to find what you're doing interesting and want to be part of it. And so whether that's, software development or whether it's marketing or creative or even sales, the people get involved with these companies at the beginning stages because they can, number one, have impact on them. It's not like a job. It's something that they're coming in and actually building that company with the person, but also because they have a vested interest. They have a keen interest. They're the people that have the most to gain from the success or failure of that company. And that's really why people do that. They come in. So you don't need to have a solution already identified. You really need to fundamentally have just a problem. And that'll take iterations and going through it to be able to get it to market. It's never the same company as what you started out with or the same product. That's an extreme process with different iterations and getting people involved. But it's having that one key thought in your head that you just have to let out to get started. And that's all it takes, literally.
Well, and I love it that you're using the sweat equity. You're using someone's time as their resource and their skill set rather than having actual funds. I think about so many people don't have a passion for what it is that they do. They might have hobbies, but going into the work for the 9 to 5, most people dread it. I mean, everyone has that kind of dread on Monday of going into the job that they don't love. So being able to give somebody an outlet that they can be passionate about is really wonderful.
It's huge because it gives them an alternative way to also have a shot, meaning that they're able to be involved in something that they care about, something they want to see come to life, something that even as they start joining, each day goes on, it even becomes more important. But they can see the potential in it. It's something they like doing. So if they have excess time, excess capacity, it makes sense for them to go ahead and do it. If they're the type of person that's crazy busy, they've got a full family going, they're running around from sport to sport and from school to school, and they don't have time at all. that's probably not the person. But what you find is that typically the higher the skill set, the better somebody gets at something, the higher echelon of those verticals, they typically have time. And they have a lot of time. These experienced people at doing what they're doing. And so what happens is with us, we don't create companies, excuse me, that we call what's an MVP, a minimum viable product. We use basically Gusher to create a market viable product, something that is self-sustaining, something that's well thought out, because you can leapfrog generational development by using those people. So that's really the key, is using experienced people that know what the hell they're doing a lot better than what you do and what you know in that vertical.
Absolutely. So your website is gusher.co, C-O, and I went down a rabbit hole earlier today of looking through it in preparation for this, and it's so cool. So when you go to the website, you have the startup line, so you can see all the different startups. You click on them, they say what the problem is, they say what the solution is, they've got a little video that you can go through, and then there's a place for all the roles they're looking for, so you can see all the different sort of opportunities that are there. I mean, it's a beautiful system. Like, how did you come up with this?
Basically, it's the way that we've been, or I should say, I've been building companies for a long time. I mean, quite literally decades. It's something that I've always never really needed capital at the beginning stages of a company. It's something that really I would always get the company going. A long time ago, we used to call this finagling. You'd finagle your way and be able to find somebody, and then you'd finagle a distributor or a marketer or manufacturing, and you talk them into being part of the company. What we've done is more formalize the process and really brought it to the masses with really a specific step-by-step process on how to do it. And it's just the way that I've always built companies. Never needed money in the beginning stages, always needed it at later stages when we were basically expanding massively or trying to take over a vertical. But to get a company off the ground, you don't need anything but an idea and the tools that you already have. That's it. Or a problem and the tools that you already have.
Yeah, because there was a post I saw on social media today where someone wrote it as money is, and then blank, and then asked people to fill out what the blank is. And one of my good friends had written that money is a lagging indicator of the value you provide. And
100%.
I loved that answer so much. And it feels like that ties in so beautifully to what it is that you're doing and creating here with Gusher.
Well, we say good deal first, money second. So what do we mean by that? Well, if a company is created without money, okay, what it does is forces you as a founder to focus extremely on only the important stuff. And by focusing on only the important stuff, by focusing on the stuff that is going to move the needle in the biggest way, have the most attraction, in the sales way, focusing on that really, really important stuff because you don't have the time or the resources to do it. What it ends up happening is the product formed as a result is almost always superior because there's no fluff, there's no waste. It's very hard to go ahead and design simple products, simple companies, simple solutions in a simple way. It takes absolute clarity of thought. And if you have money there, why wouldn't it be easier? You can just pay people and do whatever. Yeah, but it's transactional. It's something where they're not part of that process really at a human level, and they have to be part of that process at a human level. And money at that stage is not needed. It's a waste. It's actually a detriment. It's like an anchor to the bottom of the ocean. That's why venture capital firms have such a dismal success rate, and that's why startups, just bootstrapped companies with no financing, the general success rates of business in overall, they have a much higher success rate. Much higher.
Well, you always hear about venture capitalists looking for the unicorn, right? Like that it's already there and shiny and got the, flowing mane or whatever, but you're really looking for the diamonds in the rough and then helping to mine them and polish them.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually even more than that. We're giving them life. We're actually giving it life. I mean, most of these companies would never have a shot at all of being able to get venture capital. I remember one of the reasons why I started Gusher was I was in a venture capital meeting down in Washington, D.C. And there was this group of entrepreneurs that They didn't look like everyone else. They didn't talk like everyone else, sound like everyone else. They didn't wear hoodies and attend Stanford. They didn't live in New York, Silicon Valley, or Israel, but their ideas were just absolutely brilliant. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm getting goosebumps on my arms because every time I tell this story, gives me goosebumps. But they didn't know, they didn't have a chance in hell of getting venture capital. They had none. Especially being in DC, and 97% of the venture capital are in those regions that I just said, New York, Silicon Valley, or Israel. And if you're anywhere else, good luck. It almost never happens. You've got a 1 in 700 to 1 in 3,500 chance. So they had these great ideas, and what was going to happen was they were going to fall to the wayside. And I went back to my office and I was like, this isn't right. There should be another methodology. And I was like, and then just went through the thought process.
So one thing that I really stood out to me when I was looking through of all these different positions that are open that are going to be these really key roles within the development of this company, and thinking about culture and like fit and personality fit, is that something that you guys talk about? Because I could see that leading to issues or challenges down the road.
Let me ask you a question. Do you remember what I asked you before this actually started? What question I asked you?
You asked me several.
Okay, well, there was one specific question I asked you, and there's a reason why I said that, okay? First of all, and I'll say what it is. I asked you why you do what you do. What was the reason that you did this? Why did you become an engineer? Why did you then go into this other aspect of coaching, high performance coaching, etc.? And you went me through the whole different story of why you did this, okay? The reason I asked that question is because it's kind of like a blueprint. It's the Rosetta Stone for interacting with a person, so long as that person answers it honestly. So you asked regarding culture, and this is going to tie into that very specifically. What I say to founders is when they're really building that team initially is that ask that question. You're not sitting there and hiring a person. It's not transactional. It's more like dating. It's more of finding the right philosophy that's shared as a collaborative way with that other person. You have to have that foundationally, otherwise it's not going to happen, especially with a startup that you're bootstrapping, that you're going ahead and creating with performance-based equity, with no money whatsoever. You need to have that culture created from the beginning. And that culture is a commonality in a way, not 100%, but a commonality and a fundamental belief set that are shared as to what you're doing.
That's so beautiful. And it does make sense. And I was thinking of it more from the perspective of we usually tend to like to work with people who are like us, but that's not necessarily what's best for the team. Sometimes you need people with alternative skills so that you can balance each other out and have a more full skill set.
But you said alternative skills. Now, I'm not saying that a person should have the same skills. What I'm saying is that a person should fundamentally have the same belief structure, the same philosophy, and fundamentally the exact opposite skills. With me, I've never written a line of code. I have technical patents. I never did any of that. I'm the person that originates the idea. Other people develop it. Other people are on those patents also. They actually create them. I have my strengths. My strengths is talking, persuading people, convincing, communicating. Their strengths are typing in code and knowing exactly what to do. And we argue about things, and arguing is part of really the good stuff. It's not that you're in agreement 100%. You're in agreement about where the company's going. You can be in disagreement as to how to get there, but I always fall on the side of my team members when they know what their stuff is. They know their knowledge base, I should say, of what they're doing a lot better. So I may question a UI UX decision, but my UI UX designer, Maya, she knows her stuff. So I'm going to say this: let's go with it. You run with the ball. You make the decision, and if we need to change it later, we change it. But you always let them make the decision when it comes down to it.
And that's about having the clarity of what we talked about earlier about the simplicity of knowing exactly what it is that is the goal, because then you're coming together from that more belief, core level than just skill sets, the more
external. But I think it's more, I say something, and I said this in this morning's team meeting, okay? Because we have certain things going on with large scale investors. And I said to them, listen, many times these investors like to go ahead and do due diligence, and they like to talk to you and everything else. And what they'll do is they'll talk to you and they'll ask you certain questions, maybe regarding the tech stack or regarding, I don't know, monthly average users and stuff like that, and how you're going to develop the process. But then they drop in a question at the end that's like, well, can you tell me what Gusher is about? And they have to understand that an investor's real question is that last one. They don't give a shit about us. They don't give a crap about the tech stack. They don't care about that at all. What they're trying to find out is, do these people really think the same? Are they fundamentally doing and working on the same project? So the one thing we always say at the end of our meetings is, what are we building? We're building the greatest startup engine ever. That's it. Everybody knows that. It's very simple. So any decision that we make, anything that we're looking at is always through that lens, creating the greatest startup engine ever, everything that we do.
And that's so true for any business.
Yes.
Business, any level, every employee should be able to succinctly communicate what it is that the goal of their company is.
And that's more important, I think, than the details. It's more important than almost in a way their technical skills. Those can always be learned. It's more important than, let's say, their communication skills. Those can even be learned. So long as the fundamental philosophy is there and that belief as to what you're building is there, that's important stuff. That's important to lay that groundwork down from the very beginning. Everybody should collaborate on what you're building in terms of how to say it, what you're really doing, and get an agreement on that. And that's the first major buy-in when you're creating your team, is creating that. Some people call it a mission statement. I don't really like that. I hate that term. I don't know why. It's always sat with me the wrong way. I just look at it as what's our goal? What are we building?
Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of interviewing so many amazing entrepreneurs, and I think that this question will resonate really well with you. There's been 3 words that I have heard to describe kind of the essence of what it takes for someone to be successful. And they're very similar words. And so I'm curious kind of as to, before I tell you what the words are, like what your thoughts are. And then I want to give you these words and see which one resonates more with you. But if you
I think there's one thing that's required, nothing else. Nothing else. It's not, there may be 3 variations or 3 different takes. I think all it is the ability or choice or grit, whatever you want to call it, to never give up. That's all it is. You just don't ever give up. You may have to iterate. You may have to change. You just keep going. You never give up. Never giving up is not in the vocabulary giving up of the entrepreneur. You're not an entrepreneur if that is in your vocabulary, because the amount of stuff that's going to hit you that you don't see, that's in the shadows and come at you from all different directions, you just can't make it up. I mean, I can tell you stories that you could not believe as to what happened. As your titled is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's exactly what's going to happen. And in that proportion, it's going to be good maybe 30% of the time if you're lucky. It's more likely about 5 to 10% of the time. The bad is going to be anywhere between 10 to 20%. And everything else, that's 60 to 80%, depending upon the range, is just ugly. It's just ugly. So, whether it's grit, I really think it's just never giving up at all, period.
Well, and that's completely in line. So the words that I'll get is persistence.
Yep.
Tenacity.
Yep.
Tenacious or relentless.
Exactly.
And so never giving up is completely all encompassing in that. So I
always say this. I love those words. I feel like when you say never give up, an 8-year-old can understand it. And therefore I try to put all my terminology that an 8-year-old can understand, because we teach that also. Always say it in terms that an 8-year-old can understand. But it is. That is everything. I've seen people that you can't imagine would have a successful company. You can't imagine it. But they just hung in there. They had the worst idea in the world. I mean, stuff that you're sitting there going, no way this is going to work. And that's why we don't pass judgment on stuff at the beginning stages. We let the market decide, because it always evolves. So long as they hang in there, it evolves and they learn.
Well, I think there's probably so many things in the market that when it first came out, we were all like, what is this? Like, we don't need this. I remember when the iPad came out and it was so like poo-pooed upon and everyone thought it was terrible. And what can we use? Why would we ever need this? And now, of course, tablets are a way of life that we have.
Yeah, but see, you bring up something that I use in other discussions for other reasons. You didn't remember that there was a Microsoft tablet about 3 or 4 years prior that had a massive release, all this money thrown in it, and it fell flat, completely failed, 100%. It failed.
did not realize that.
Yeah.
Man,
I bought it. I was one of the 5 people that bought it. So
well, timing is everything, right?
exactly.
So as I was looking through all of the different startups and watching the different videos,
Sure.
there are varying qualities.
Of
And,
course.
I mean, everyone's at the level that they're at. And one thing that really came across is you could really tell kind of who was more of the left brained analytical thinkers and who was more of the right brain and kind of had a bit more pizzazz. Do you work with them at all in adjusting those skills to make it a little bit more enticing?
Yes and no. So there's a certain philosophy about that. Okay. And I took it from the used car market, and I'll try to say this without cursing. Okay. There is a but for every car, meaning that no matter how bad it is or how whatever, there's always a but for that. There's always a buyer for that car. Okay. With founders, you got to understand this. So long as they're honest. And that comes across whether they're a good presenter or a bad presenter, the honesty. All right. That comes across, that resonates with certain people. So if a person's more analytical, they're not as creative, they're not as communicative, there's people for that. And if anything, that's now an opportunity for somebody that's a marketer that's great at that to be able to step in. That's somebody that's awesome for biz dev for that to be able to step in. That's somebody that's awesome for social media or something for that to be able to step in. So they don't have to be the most communicative. I mean, we've had everything from is it 19-year-old college students to 80-year-old grandmas in South Africa be able to launch companies successfully. And I mean, everything in between. I've had founders that talk like robots. They think like robots. They don't have an emotional IQ above really one, but they still have successful companies. Why? Because the people that join them fill in those gaps. That's what you do when you're building up a team. You don't go ahead and just fill up your strengths and with people that have your strength. Yes, your philosophy, but not your strengths. You fill it up with people that are different than you, like you were saying earlier.
Oh gosh, I love that so very much. So I want to pivot a little bit. We're not going to go too much into your childhood or how you came to be here. But one thing that you've said that really stuck out to me was talking about the influence of your stepfather and him not being a really great guy. And now how that helped you to develop, that kind of like,
Yeah.
don't care, I'm going to do this anyway sort of attitude. Now, I know you're a father to 3 sons who have a lot of entrepreneurial energy to them. How do you compare and contrast kind of your experience growing up with how you're raising your boys and what you're seeing there?
So, well, I mean, the way I grew up was I call it the furnace. And I have this thing all about, you can be an entrepreneur if, or you're qualified to be an entrepreneur if. And I always lead it off this whole big long list of things that I say. Number one is if you come from an effed up family, right? If you come from an effed up family, it prepares you in so many ways that parallel business that it's awesome. I mean, it basically shows you the absolute worst of humanity and prepares you for it so that when you run into the best of humanity, you may be caught and taken back by it, but it's a hell of a lot easier than just finding out about the worst of humanity for the first time and trying to build a company, So that's a good thing. Going through the furnace changes you. It either turns you to ash or it hardens you and turns you into a different material and something better. And so I think the furnace is something that everybody has to go through at some point in their life, whether they want to or not. They're going to go through it, whatever that may be. With my sons, it's fundamentally different. I never encouraged them to be business oriented. Now, that doesn't mean that, okay, maybe it's not in the DNA and they weren't around it and everything else, but they've all been business oriented in every way, shape, or fashion. Now, lately, as they get above the age of 8, I always start taking them to meetings with me, funding meetings, investor meetings, all over the place because, well, A, I can do it, but B, that's all I know. So I'm not the type of dad that, hey, let's go out and hit baseball and do whatever, although I do that horribly. I know business, so I teach them what I know, and that's the best thing. And so they have that skill set, and they'll continue to develop it, maybe, or maybe they'll be, I don't know, a ballet dancer or something else. I don't know, so long as they're happy.
Oh, that's really nice. I really like that. And I think a lot of kids naturally have that ability. I
Yeah,
know that, kids are always wanting to start lemonade stands. My daughter started a stuffed animal exchange at her elementary school. My
That's
son
great.
had a black market tic-tac-toe game going on during recess. So I think it's kind of a natural thing. And I think there's some point along the lines where someone tells us, no, you can't do that idea.
Yeah.
Kind of kills that dream. And while I think having coaches and mentors and advisors is incredibly important, I also think it's really important just to have cheerleaders sometimes,
Yeah.
just someone in your corner that believes in you.
But I also think, worst case scenario, if you can't be a cheerleader, just leave them alone. Seriously, I said, because leave them alone and let them do their ideas. Because who the hell are you to say that it's going to work or not? Are you the market? Are you every possible buyer? Are you every possible scenario? And that's why you can't do that as a parent. I mean, I think about my sons and what they've done, and my youngest son, his first business was taking these sand sculptures that he just took a mold to and brought them out to the driveway and tried selling them. And I sat there and I was like, no way, absolutely not. I know we'll get a pity buy from maybe a neighbor or something like that, but sure enough, that has a whole story to it with people joining him and then selling other stuff, and it ballooned into a whole big thing. And sure enough, he just sat there for the first 2 hours and had nobody, nothing, but he went through it. I didn't tell him to go through it. I didn't encourage him. I left him alone just to see what he would do.
Well, who's your biggest cheerleader? Who's in your corner?
No such thing. Doesn't exist. I never had a mentor. I never had anything like that at all. Zero. Nobody's saying, good job, Chris.
Do you wish you had?
I think I wish I had, but it's one of those things that you look back in hindsight and you say to yourself, would I change anything about my childhood? Would I change anything about my experience? No, because I don't know how the story ends yet. So why? I mean, have I had a great life? Sure, absolutely. Do I have a great family, great businesses? I mean, I have more businesses than people start in hundreds of years, and I've been able to do that, so I'm happy with it. Am I happy in general? No, because I'm the type of person that's always creating and frustrated and whatever. So, happiness isn't my natural state overall, but, I'm happy with where I am. Absolutely.
It's an interesting thing because there's so many different ways that people define that and what that looks like to people. I mean, for someone being happy, could be just being in like their cottage and they're very homey and cozy. Someone else could be laying on a beach. It's all kind of, each person's own identity. But, how do you define success? And do you consider yourself successful? Because that's sort of a different metric than happiness.
Sure. I think success is going to bed at night with no regrets. I really do. I think that most people, like we started out talking about how they may feel yucky, they may hate it going into the office on Monday morning. I used to get that feeling at times on Sunday nights. And when I had that feeling on Sunday nights, I'm like, I'm on the wrong road. I am on the wrong road. I have to get on that right road because I can't live like that. And I think untapped human potential is just tragic. I mean, it's the biggest tragedy there is not letting, as I said before many times, letting that little voice out that's telling you, yes, you can do this. Because that little voice inside a person's head is very tiny. It's one little lone voice, and you have all these different external forces, all these different internal voices trying to drown it out. Oh, and that's what I wanted to say. We were touched on the kids earlier and the support structure and being a cheerleader and everything else. And I think there was a study recently, I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 80 or 90% at the age of 5 or 6 were considered genius level. And then they took it again, and when they were 8 or 10, and it went down to like 60 or 50. Then they went to 15 to 20 years old, and it went down to 30 or 20%. And it's that I think listening or having the impact of those external and internal voices telling you can't do something or not even trying to do anything.
Right. I mean, fear is such a mirage. Most of the time it's this big scary thing, but once you approach it and go through it, it vanishes.
Absolutely. 100% agree. But I also think fear is a great fuel to be able to ride. I think fear, if anything, can go ahead and create some great stuff. It's a hard thing to keep long term because it has a price, a certain physical toll it'll take on your body, your mental state. But fear can do a hell of a lot of good. I think a lot of good things come from being almost in a way motivated by fear. So I don't necessarily think that fear a person should try to get rid of or try to pretend is not there. I think they should recognize that fear is there, whatever it is, good fear, bad fear, anticipation, anxiety, and use it. It's telling you to do something typically when you're in that state of fear. It's telling you, you've got to listen to that voice as to how to go ahead and get rid of it in a way. And typically people know how to get rid of it. They don't like the answer though.
Right, exactly. So as we're wrapping up, there's one thing that I've been adding to the interviews, and it has been examining some common phrases that are in our vernacular that people assume as universal truths. So I want to know if this phrase is true for you or how you choose to look at it differently. So the first phrase I have for you is, it's a numbers game.
For me, no.
Okay. How do you think of that?
I don't think it's necessarily just going, and I have this internally with this discussion with our company, which is why I'm saying that this way. Okay. I don't think it's necessarily anything a function of numbers. I think that it's a function of thoughtful iterations and attacking it with thought. There are certain things you can throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. All right. There are certain things you can go after. In the beginning stages, it's like that. All right. But once you're past that stage, what I mean is by experience, where you've already been through that, you've already done the numbers game ad nauseum. Okay. It becomes more of a very precise hunting, whether it's for your ideas, whether it's for what you want to let out and achieve. And I think that attacking it that way ends up giving more productivity or more result. At least for me, it does. So I don't sit there and just throw numbers. Yes, it's still a grind. Yes, it's still a numbers game, but it's a thoughtful numbers game, more of a hunting.
Yeah, more intentionality to it.
Absolutely. That's a much better word than what I just said.
All right. Second phrase, fortune is in the follow-up.
I don't think you get anything done without follow-up. Zero, nada. I think that if anything, it's more like follow-up times 100 is what's required to be able to get anything done. I remember one of my companies, we end up being the largest manufacturer in its vertical. Okay, that we would call these stores time and time and time again. But after you start hitting them 30, 40, 50, 100 times, then finally they give up. They let your product in. It's that whole relentless thing. It's the never giving up, and it just melts away. But that knowing that now makes it a lot easier for somebody starting out. That's a brutal thing to go through because you question yourself every day. How much further should I push? How long should I continue this without seeing results or seeing low results? So as long as you're getting any type of result positive, keep going,
All right, last one I have for you. Consistency is key.
100%. There's nothing that beats consistency. You can't just sit there and have wishful thinking. You have to be vicious with your consistency. One of my sons, actually all of them now, lift with me. And my my oldest son lifts with me in the morning at 5 a.m. And he came to me about a year and a half ago and said, "Hey, I want to start weight training." I said, "That's nice." I go, "But in order to do it and really learn it, you have to at least do this for a year, about 5, sometimes 6 times a week with me every morning." And the one thing that kid's done is every morning, 5 a.m., he's at it. It's consistent. And he looks literally like a completely different person a year later. Same thing with every business there is. You have to come in, you have to do it. Whether you want to do it or not, doesn't matter. Whether the weather is good or not, doesn't matter. Whether you're hungry or feeling bad, doesn't matter. Whether you have other stuff to do, doesn't matter. Everything is a squirrel. Everything is meant to go ahead and get your focus off the ball. The person that is the most consistent, the most focused over time will win.
Over intelligence.
Absolutely. Intelligence is not an important character trait at all, or trait at all. It's really the ability to go ahead and go after it and just dogged determination, but it's got to be consistent. You can't go ahead and go at it determined for 7 days or 30 days. I'm talking you go at it for years and you don't stop. You just don't stop. The only person that can stop that roller coaster of awesomeness is tell me who.
Yep.
You. That's it. Period. That's the only person that can stop it. No one else. Not the government, not your friends, not your family, not creditors, not natural disasters. Nobody can stop that other than you.
Yeah, it's so easy. Oh, there's inflation, there's war, there's all these things. There's always things.
There's always things. It's like the whole argument, oh, it's not a good time to have a child. There's never a bad time. Come on, it's the same thing with business and starting it. All it is an excuse. And that's one of the first steps that a founder has to face, is whether or not that's an excuse. And those are the types of things they have to overcome. Those are voices and things they were told from, a very young age, that they have to literally push out of their head and take the leap. And take that leap, because that one little voice inside your head deserves it. The one that says yes.
I think that's a perfect place to end on, Chris. This has been fabulous. The time has flown by. I appreciate all of your wisdom that you have shared. Last word to you. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I literally, the never give up thing, but listen to that little voice. Otherwise, you'll be like my real father on his deathbed, regretting every last decision that he made because he didn't go for it and didn't do what he wanted to do. And it was business oriented, believe it or not. I was literally shocked that he didn't do it. You're going to end up regretting it. So if you have a voice in your head and you look at yourself in the mirror and it brings a smile to your face, do it. If you're thinking about it in the morning and when you wake up, do it. If you go to sleep at night and you're thinking about it, do it. Don't worry about the consequences. Just do it, because at least then, even if it fails, you'll be able to live with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so very much. This has been wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
And to the listeners, thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this information, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if there's someone else that you're curious about, an industry, a person, a different type of role, please reach out. I'd love to try to find the perfect guest for them. Until next time, everyone, take care. That was so fun.